So in my last week's video, Grieving Part 1, I talked about the two patterns that I'm seeing in the grieving process. The first one is when somebody goes through a traumatic event, they actually skip over the grieving process because they want to make everything as if it was normal, if things were okay. And so they think that if they skip the grieving process, then they could normalize their life, which ends up backfiring on them because they really needed the grieving process before they could move on with their life. And then the second pattern that I was seeing in the grieving process is that sometimes we grieve too long, where it now starts to really debilitate us, where we cannot move forward in our life. And that's when grieving becomes a real problem in our life, when we feel debilitated and paralyzed. And, I have a couple of members in my Facebook community that is going through this right now. One of the members, she lost her mother 7 months ago, and she said that she couldn't move forward with her life because of the loss of her mother. And that is very deep-seated grieving. And so what I wanted to do for this video, Grieving Part 2, is to share with you practical tips that could help you manage and handle grieving, especially when you're in that deep-seated grieving state, like the loss of a mother, the loss of a child. I mean, these are very, very traumatic events, and our grief can be really deep. And also, to help you in your grieving process, I created a meditation just for grieving to go along with this video. So after this video, you can listen to that meditation as many times as you need to help in your grieving process. So I want to know from you, in the interest of helping each other individually and collectively to heal from our grieving, what tips and techniques have you used in your life that has helped you to grieve? Has it been meditation or prayer, therapy, counseling, support of family and friends, or something else? Share your answers and comments below. So the most powerful tool that I've used to help with my own grieving process is what I call a grieving meditation. And I shared this meditation with a viewer that I had a private one-on-one session some months ago to help her acknowledge and honor her grief so she could move forward with her life. And so this grieving meditation is to become present with your grieving emotions, to become present with it. And so what does it mean to become present with our grieving? So when we have this traumatic grief in our life, whether it's a loss of, let's say, a child, a parent, a loved one, or maybe even a divorce, we have all of these emotions of loss, emptiness, feeling alone, right? Depressed, right? Even anxiety, right? Or even fear, because sometimes when we lose someone, we've relied on them for certain things, and now we have that fear and anxiousness that our safety, our support has been taken away. And so we're going through all of these emotions that we can possibly think of. I mean, there are a lot of deep emotions going on there. And so I always say the best way to handle any kind of negative emotion is to just be present with that emotion. We don't want to suppress it and put it under the rug. We want to become absolutely present with it, like a third eyewitness observer. So what you want to do in this grief meditation is to go back to that moment when you felt that tremendous grief, like that first moment. So perhaps you lost a child, or you lost a mother, or you lost a sibling. Go back to that moment when you first felt that grief. Maybe it was the moment where you found out about the loss. Maybe a family member called you and said your mother died. Go back to that moment. Or maybe it was a moment where you went to the funeral and you felt for the first time that deep grief. So go back to the moment where you felt the deepest grief. I really want you to go back to that moment. I don't want you to sugarcoat this. I want you to go back to that moment, and I want you to do a meditation on that moment where you close your eyes and you visualize that moment. You recall that moment, and tears may start dripping down your face. You might have an increase of heart rate. You might feel some discomfort in some part of your body. I just want you to be present with that. Whatever you're feeling, I want you to just be present with it. And just take your awareness and just pull it back and just become a third eyewitness observer of that feeling, whatever that feeling is. Become a third eyewitness observer of that feeling. Maybe it's that feeling of tremendous loss, depression, anxiety, fear, loss of security, loss of safety, loss of protection, feeling alone. Whatever that feeling is, just be fully present with it during your meditation. Just keep being present with it, present with it, present with it, present with it, that grief feeling. And you might feel some sensations in your body. Maybe it's in your heart, maybe it's in your shoulder, maybe it's in your stomach, maybe it's in your head. Just be present with that feeling. Whatever it is, allow it, acknowledge it, honor it. And as you keep being present with those feelings and just allowing it to happen, and not even judging it, but just observing it like a third eyewitness observer, what happens is that energy, see, grief, all emotions, all thoughts, all grief is just energy. And energy never stays the same. Energy has to evolve and change, right? There is no energy that stays the same, right? I always say change is the only permanent thing. Change is the only constant in life. So that energy must change. It must evolve. And so as you become present with that energy and just hold with that energy, it really evolves into something beautiful and magical. It starts to evolve into compassion for yourself, actually, really. The practice of bodhicitta is to have that deep compassion for yourself. That's what happens with grief energy when you just become present with it. When you pull your awareness back and just observe it and just hold. And you'll see that that energy starts to evolve into compassion for yourself and compassion for your own suffering and pain. And as you start to have this incredible compassion for yourself, you start to feel that unconditional love within yourself and around you, and that unconditional love of the divine. And also feeling that grief really turning into an awareness of the presence of love within you and around you all the time. So let's say you lost a child and that grief is so painful, and you hold to that energy and just become present with that grief. It starts to evolve into really compassion, understanding, and love. And once you start to feel that love, what happens is you feel that love energy of your child with you and around you always. Always. So that's what happened with my late sister's son. I started to imagine when she was at her deathbed in the hospital. That's what I did. I literally just visualized in my meditation when she was on her deathbed, and which was really, really painful. And during that meditation, as I was just being present with that deep grief of witnessing the death of my late sister's son in the hospital, I started having tears roll down my face. And then as I just kept on being present and just observing that grief and feeling where that grief was in my body and observing my late sister's son's death, that presence just evolved into compassion for myself, my own pain and suffering of grief. Because, my late sister's son is now gone and her soul is free. So she's pain free in terms of the physical body. So I really needed that unconditional compassion for my own suffering and pain. And as I started to have that unconditional compassion for my suffering and pain, I started to feel the love of my late sister's son with me and around me, and the love of God and the divine. And once I started to have that love of God and divine and feel that unconditional love within me and around me, that really helped me to alleviate my grief, because that energy turned and evolved into something beautiful. And so the grieving meditation has really been the most powerful tool for me to handle and manage my grief. And so the second powerful tool that I've used for my grieving process is to find the greatest lesson from the greatest tragedy. So in my case, I was looking for the greatest lesson from my late sister's son's death. And it was because of her death that it was my greatest gift to my spiritual awakening and enlightenment. Because if it wasn't for my late sister's son's death, I would never have nurtured and actively been on my spiritual path. I would never have gone to the Buddhist Meditation Center for 1 month. I would never have read my first spiritual book called Grace and Grit. I would never have started to try to practice meditation, learn about my higher consciousness, learn about energy, learn about my higher self, learn about the universal forces of divine and energy, learn about my soul, learn about God's perspective. I would never have done that if it wasn't for my late sister's son's death. And so I always say that my late sister's son's death was for a very good reason. What was the reason? Well, what my sister's son is telling me now, she's sending me spiritual messages to say, do the work of yin and yang living. I'm going to shine the light onto you. The sun's light is now going to shine on you, moon, so you can shine that light back out into the universe and promote these higher messages to help the planet heal. So in the physical world, the way we see the moon is by the sun's light reflecting on the moon, and that light gets reflected back out onto the universe. And that's how we see the moon, right? That's how we physically see the moon. And so it was because of Sun's death that I can do this teaching. You see the yin and yang, the harmony and balance, the divine and infinite wisdom of how the universe set that up. The universe set it up so that my sister's son's death can be the catalyst for my own spiritual awakening, so then I can shine that message out to the universe to help people heal, right? You see that divine order of the universe. And so for this lesson, what I want you to do is on one column, write down the greatest tragedy in your life, whatever that is. Maybe it's a loss of a child, maybe it's a loss of a parent, maybe it's a divorce. Whatever the greatest tragedy is, write it down. And in the next column, write down what all of the lessons are, why you have experienced that tragedy, and what lessons are you learning from that tragedy. And I'm telling you, when you learn that lesson, you're really, really connecting with the deep part of you. And you're really looking at the situation from the soul's perspective. And when you see things from the soul's perspective, that is when you will see things from God's perspective. And when you see things from God's perspective, that is when you can start to have unconditional compassion and love for yourself and others. That is when we can evolve that grief energy into something beautiful and magical. So the third tip about grieving is to share your grieving story with somebody who really cares about you. Maybe it's a family member, a close friend, a counselor, a therapist. Maybe it's somebody at church, like a pastor, minister, somebody in a private group, somebody in your tribe that you know truly cares about you and has your back. Because when we talk and share about the grieving, it's a way of releasing that energy. Because I always say that grieving is like everything else. It's energy. And energy must be evolved and transmuted into something. It can't stay the same. So when you hold on to that grieving, it festers in your body, and then it turns into something negative like anxiousness, depression, or like fear, or feeling that loneliness, or that lack of security or safety. So you want to be able to release that grief energy, and by sharing with somebody, it helps to release it. So I always say that, when I go to a therapy session, just by the virtue of me talking about it to somebody, it helps me with that grieving emotion just by talking about it. So really, if you have that grief, please share it with somebody who cares about you. Don't hold on to it. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it. That's why I always encourage people to really talk about it, share it with somebody that really cares about them. And so that's really my third tip in the grieving process. So as I said before, I released a meditation to help you in the grieving process. So after this video, go listen to that meditation and listen to it as many times as you need it. And if you have a story about your grieving, please share it with us, because your experiences, comments, and feedback really help me and my community at large. And if you like this video, please make sure to share it and subscribe to my channel. And I encourage you to join our Facebook community, where we do live group healing meditations, and we do live sessions on important topics like loneliness, grieving, or toxic relationships, among other topics. And we also provide one-on-one private healing sessions, if you need some deeper healing, or if you want to keep your issue private. We offer that on our Facebook community. So the community is really to help you have deeper healing of your mind, body, and soul. So ask to join at the link below, which is facebook.com/groups/yin and yang living, facebook.com/groups/yin and yang living. And I look forward to seeing you on our Facebook community. And if you wish to visit all of my spiritual and holistic living tips, just go to my website at yinandyangliving.com. Thank you. Namaste.